Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Duran with DuranSupply.com, where I help you design smarter, not harder. Today we're going over a really quick effect that is absolutely delicious. It's this extremely worn out type that looks like a really old and cracked screen print. Easy way to add a lot of life to a piece of text. Before I start, happy Thanksgiving y'all, and if you're new here, I post videos like this every week to help you become a better designer. So go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this. Let's get started. So like I said, super quick effect. Let's create a new document here, and I'm going to be using my default settings, which is 16 by 20 inches at 300 dpi. The most important factor here, of course, being the 300 dpi, which is high resolution for print. So let's go ahead and create this document. We'll just type in some text here. I'm using the font Balboa from Adobe Fonts. First order of operations, let's throw some layer styles on this thing. So we'll open up the layer styles panel here. I'll reset this to the default list. First things first, let's add a color overlay here at 50% gray. So to do that, just open up the color panel here, go all the way to the left so that your color is on gray. You can make sure it's at exactly 50% by typing in 50 in the B option here. Press OK. And now we want to add a inner shadow. Let's set that blend mode to multiply. We'll turn the opacity all the way up. Let's first turn the size up so we can see what we're working with here. And then we want to turn the distance up as well. And we kind of just want to darken the top left edge of the type here, and that's going to help us simulate some depth and a photocopy feel. Now that I can see what I'm working with here, let's turn the opacity of this back down to somewhere around 50, which we're going to play with later anyway. Now let's add another inner shadow by pressing on the plus icon over here, and we'll set the choke somewhere in the middle, the size mostly down, and the distance to also something really low, just to get that sharp shadow at the top left edge on the text here. Probably turn the choke down a little bit just so it's a little softer, and I'll turn the opacity down a bit as well too. Now this isn't set in stone, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. We're going to change all of this later. So next up, let's press OK and add a threshold adjustment layer on top of this text, and of course that looks like shit until we add some texture in here. So go ahead and add your favorite scan texture right under the threshold adjustment. It could be my scan texture from my texture pack. It could be from Google. It could be from anywhere. Just add a scan texture in here. Now we'll set the blending mode of this texture to overlay. But if your texture isn't too close to gray, what you want to do is open up the levels panel and just drag the mid-tone slider here into the center of the kind of Gaussian distribution that is shown in the levels panel. And that'll kind of bring it closer to a 50% neutral gray, and that way it doesn't brighten or darken the image too much when you set it to overlay. So let's press OK on that, and obviously this is looking pretty interesting, but you can tell we're kind of getting there. This texture is actually somehow too high quality, so I'm going to blur it a little bit with a Gaussian blur. We'll just set that to around 0.7, looking good. Now we're getting somewhere, so let's go ahead and put this texture and the threshold in a group, and we'll name that processing. And let's also put the text in a group, and we'll just name that text. Now really quickly, I'm going to go back into the layer styles of this and just tweak it so that the inner shadow isn't too harsh coming down on this left side here. So what I could do is just turn the opacity down quite a bit to somewhere really low on both of these inner shadows, just so we have not too harsh of an effect, but we still keep that depth on the text here. So that's looking good. I'll press OK. And now since this text is in a group, we can clip some textures onto this. So this is up to your discretion. Of course, any textures that you think would work well here. I personally really love how my warm PLASTISOL textures look, especially with this effect. It just brings it all together super nicely. So that's what I'm going to use. But if you don't have them, of course, you have two options. So one, you can go pick those up at my website. They're probably on sale still if you're watching this within 2 weeks of me posting. But if it's not, no worries. Just use the code YouTube15 at checkout, and that'll get you 15% off of these textures. Or your second option would just be to use some other similar texture that you have. But I promise you, there's nothing like them. So I'm going to just drag some of these in. I'll drag in this third texture here, and I want to clip that to my text here. So I'm going to hold down Alt and press in between the text layer and the texture layer, and that'll clip that to my text group. And now I could set this to multiply, and it'll appear only in my text. Looking pretty cool. For some more customization, we can add a levels adjustment clip to this text as well. So we'll add that to the mix, clip it to the text layer, and now we can play around with the parameters of this levels adjustment to really dial in the effect to our liking. So I find that increasing the contrast slightly by bringing the black and the white sliders in gives a pretty cool effect. But of course, you can also go back into the layer styles of this text and just play with it until you find something nice. You can play with the angle of the inner shadow. This is going to really change how your text looks. I personally like setting the angle to the top left. I just think it adds a really cool sort of photocopy-esque look to the text, but of course, up to your discretion. This is looking pretty solid, but to finalize this, we want to really roughen the edges around the text here. Right now, they're really sharp, And what would really sell this effect is if we had some rough, imperfect edges. So to do that, I'm going to duplicate my white background layer here, and I'm going to put that in a group with the text and all the layers clipped to the text. So I'll select all those and Command G. I'll just name that text 1. I don't know. Then we want to duplicate and merge this. So let's Command Alt E. And make sure this is still under the processing group. Then just blur this by a couple of pixels, so anywhere from 5 to 10 pixels. I'm going to go with around 6, 7 here. And even this is a really cool effect in itself, but if you want to keep on track with this tutorial, just set this layer to lighten. And as we see when we zoom in, that'll sort of roughen our edges here. And since we do lose some detail, I'm just going to go back in this group here and turn the levels down a bit so that we can see a little bit more of the text. Check this out. We can also add another inner shadow in here and set the opposite angle just in case we're losing any excessive detail on the opposite edge of the text here. So you can really just mess around with this as much as you want and find a nice look for your text. Here's what I ended up on. And of course, you can always play around with any of these layers to get some more experimental effects. So even on the lighten layer up here, you can play with the levels of this to get a really cool sort of grungy fade to your text. Of course, if your main concern is legibility, then you might not want to mess with these settings too much. But if you're just looking to make some visually cool stuff, just have a blast with all these settings and layer styles that you can mess around with. Here's something worth noting also. You can pretty much change the scale or intensity of this effect by, say, merging all of this. So let's go ahead and press Command Alt Option E. And then I'll create a merged duplicate of all this. I'll hide the layer below here, and then I'll create another threshold adjustment above this layer. And now if I go to blur this merged layer, so if I go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, I can pretty much play with the scale of this effect. So you can also yield pretty cool results just by blurring this after the fact, and of course playing with the threshold to your liking. And then to rasterize this, all you'd have to do is merge this layer with the threshold layer, and boom, you're good to go. If you want to remove this from the background, just go ahead and select out the white using your magic wand tool. Now we've got some super fun grungy text. Let's check out the before and after. So this is the before and here is the after. Pretty cool. All right, that's pretty much it. Remember to like and subscribe if you got any value from this, and go sign up for the mailing list at the bottom of my website. That'll give you access to free design assets, exclusive discounts on products, and any news about the shop. Hope you guys learned something. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.